Alright, this is the first in a series of videos about how to make a 2D platformer in Unity. So here we have a version of what the final game will look like, where we have player movements, player jump, we have projectile attacks, we have slash attack, we have traps that when you hit you take damage, moving platforms. We also have a parallax background to kind of give a more visually interesting output. And we have basic audio features as well. I have those off for the quick demo. Now this is a bit of a rough draft of it. This is more or less just to show you what kind of things we'll be doing. The final version of it should be much more refined. Now you should have a starter program, a starter project rather, already ready to go for you with your game scene here. Folders already in here with your asset folder. For audio, we have our sprites. We have a large selection of sprites to pick from. We have a scenes folder, a scripts folder, which currently has one script provided for you, and then several that have to do with different settings as well. The first thing that we want to do really is get our character set up. Right now, we have nothing in our scene beyond a camera and this global 2D light. We need to have a character in here to work with. So first thing we're going to do is go into sprites, castle dungeon pack, character sprites, and here we have 5 different files: character fall, character idle, character jump, character run, and character attack. Now, if you may notice that these images actually have multiple things in them, it is not just one single image. These are sprite sheets that have different frames of animation, where for the idle one, his shoulders rise and fall a little bit and he seems to kind of like bounce up and down. So we need to actually cut out the sprite sheet for us to work with it. With the character idle asset selected, over in the inspector, we have a few things we need to change. So first off, we're going to need to set the texture type. We need to make sure that this is set to sprite, 2D and UI. Sprite mode, we want to set to multiple. Pixels per unit, we will set to 32. And then we want to make sure our wrap mode is set to clamp. Filter mode, we want to set this to point no filter. We want to make sure we do that for every one of these assets that we work with. Makes it so the edges don't get blurry. And click apply. Now, all this did was set up our frames to be ready to work with. Now, with the character idle selected, go ahead and go to open sprite editor. And luckily for us, this is actually already cut out. Easy enough. But we have the different frames of animation pre-cut here. So all we have to do is grab our character idle 0 and drag it in. We now have our character. What we want to actually do with this though is for the position, let's set this to the position of 0, 0, 0. So it's right in the middle of the screen. And I'm going to create an empty, and I'll call this player character. I'll set this position to 0, 0, 0 as well. Then I want to take my character idle asset or object and drag that into player character. This way, when we move our player character object, we move the artwork, but we can actually attach other things to this without having to rely strictly on the artwork. We can actually change the artwork later simply by dragging a different piece of artwork in there. But anything that we do for the player character will still work. I'll then go ahead and rename this character idle 0 to sprite. So we have the player character object, then we have the sprite that is attached to it. So now if we move the player character, the artwork goes with it. So right now, if we press play, nothing happens. We have a character and a blue background, and that's pretty boring. So we have a couple things we need to do with this. First off, with our player character selected, add component, and we're going to add in a box collider 2D. And you should see a box that's around your character. We can then change the size to fit closer to the actual size of the artwork, or change the offset to raise it up. I'm going to go ahead and set leave the size alone, but I'm going to set the Y offset to about 0.1. That way the bottom of that box is right there on the character's feet. And we're going to end up changing this later anyways. This is just to kind of get something going. So we have a collider whose job is to let us know if we hit something. We define the size and shape of our character regardless of the artwork. But if I press play, still nothing happens, because we need to attach the other part of our physics calculation, the rigid body. So I'll go ahead and type in rigid body 2D, and we now have a rigid body 2D. Go ahead and press play, and then the character should fall. And they do. There we go. So we now have a basic character in the scene. The next step is going to be to put in some ground, and then afterwards we'll do animation, and then we'll get movement going and a couple other things. But for now, we're at a good, starting point.